Hey, I'm Mike Peel, your host of the Full Crew. If you're used to seeing this show, you'll notice that Dawn isn't here today. This year, we're going to be alternating hosting duties. We're going to be covering some in-depth topics per show as part of this new format. And we've got some great guests to talk about our first topic this year, which is AI ethics, which is an essential part of the field, and also the issues that it seems to be raising with this new swing of products we're seeing out there in the public. I'm going to go in clockwise order here. So, Rom, tell us a little bit about yourself, and we're going to go through each of our guests, and they're going to give a brief bio on who they are. So, Rom, who are you, and why are you authorized, or why do you have expertise to speak on these topics?
Hello, everyone. Pleased to be back. I'm Rommel Martínez. I'm the CTO of ASTN Group. So I've developed a state-of-the-art AI system from scratch, built from 24 years of R&D. So we're reaching the beta phase soon of our platform.
So happy to have you again, because we've had you on other shows. And I'm going to be welcoming for the first time Satya, who's the CEO of OpenCV. I've worked with Satya through the Drone Code Foundation. And I'm really excited to have him on and to talk about the important work he's doing in open source. So Satya, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thanks, Mike. Yes, I'm Satya Mallick. I'm the CEO of OpenCV.org, which maintains the biggest computer vision library in the world, OpenCV. And it's downloaded about 10 million times a month. And it has a collection of about 2,500 algorithms. And today I'm going to talk about why for AI to be ethical, it is extremely necessary that it be open source.
So excited to have you on and to discuss that angle. And then we also have another repeat. So happy to have you back, Patrick. Patrick, tell the audience a little bit about yourself.
Absolutely. Thanks, Mike. It's great to be back. I'm Patrick Huston. I'm a retired Army general. I'm now a technology lawyer. I live in San Francisco, though I'm coming to you today live from New York City. It's great to be back, Mike.
Oh, yeah, you're in my neck of the woods. Didn't know. Well, happy to have you in New York and enjoying our absolutely cold weather here. You're up first on the articles. So tell us about this 30 seconds into the future article about deepfakes.
Sure. This article is an interesting concept. That's why it grabbed my attention. What it is, it's set almost 5 years in the future, right after the 2028 election. So it's a fictional piece. And the premise is that the 2024 presidential election was an absolute disaster, Mike. And the reason for that it was disastrous is that there were deep fakes launched on every platform right after the election that caused the entire election, the nation, to be thrown into disarray, civil, political, and legal disarray for months and months after the 2024 election. So it really is a warning about the devastating potential of deep fakes if used improperly. Then fast forward, what it does is it takes you through the intervening 4 years before the 2028 presidential election and explains what they did to fix the problem of deep fakes and how they addressed it, and then ultimately had a successful 2028 presidential election. That's the basic premise.
So yeah, one of the things that I thought was interesting is they propose a system for actually stamping content. If you go back less than 2 years ago, one of the less crazy propositions from the crypto kids was using NFTs for such a feature. So I don't think that's panned out because of limitations with that technology, but what does everybody think about a digital stamping system and its importance for discerning deepfakes or original content, period?
I'll jump in first, and there has to be some way to authenticate it. I don't know the exact technology because the technology can become outdated so quickly, but the basic concept of having to have some ability to ensure that the content is valid is absolutely critical. What they went through in the article was first a failed attempt to do it. It was a watermarking attempt via government regulation, and it just never really took hold. They couldn't agree on the standards. They couldn't figure out exactly what to do. And then what they fast forwarded to the second approach, which ultimately was successful. It was initiated by the media because the media wanted to police itself, and they agreed amongst themselves to only use this authenticated content. The way the authenticated content worked is that when initially produced, the content would have what was called fact authenticated content, or FAC, a little stamp on the document itself. Once that document was altered, digitally altered, any significant alteration would cause that stamp to be removed. And all the media sources promised that they would only use authenticated documents or only authenticated photos and video. So that was the premise. And then that's, I guess, the successful application of that in the media content led to its use across several other entities. Online retailers started using it because people would know what they were buying. And then social media, so people could tell what were legitimate posts. And then ultimately dating apps took hold because people want to make sure that the picture of the prospective date out there is legitimate. So you can see how that was kind of the domino effect of how that technology took hold in this fictional article.
A total end to catfishing, I suppose. What's novel about, I think, the proposition is that it's a subtractive method rather than a permanent stamp, right? Which I know some artists out there have started spiking their work with like pixels that basically go sideways if you try to train a model on it. But this is the removal of content, so basically a societal acceptance of a stamp. So, Satya, what do you think about this?
So, in theory it looks fine, but in practice it could be very difficult. For example, let's say a face has been authenticated to be me or somebody like that, right? You can actually, there are technologies, adversarial technologies that are available right now where you can change the pixel, just a few pixels. Let's say I'm just picking something, 5 pixels, right? They could pick 5 pixels, you manipulate only 5 pixels, and the entire image, it would say that it doesn't recognize that person as me, right? So it takes very little for manipulation of the original image to it, changing the meaning, at least as viewed from AI. So the same thing can happen in text also, right? You have an article, you don't change the article, but you insert a not in front of, an important thing, right? So for example, he did not win the election, right? Versus he did win the election. You just inserted a single word, not, right, in the right place. And so to interpret that it has completely changed the article by insertion of a single word, you need AI for interpretation of that entire article, right? So it is a much more challenging thing than it appears on the surface. I don't have very good ideas for definite solutions, but they will evolve as this thing becomes problematic. But small changes can lead to big change in meaning of photos, of text, etc. And that piece needs to be done. Otherwise, you could just say that, for example, whether this image is the same, is an authentic image or not, right? You can easily create a digital signature of that image. And if it is manipulated ever so slightly, right, even 1 pixel is manipulated, then that signature changes, right? That is very easy to do if you want to do an exact match of an image. But if you want to do a semantic match of an image, that, okay, the meaning has not changed, maybe it has been cropped, maybe it has been manipulated in certain way which is not deceptive, that piece is actually very difficult to implement, right? You can imagine that even for cropping, if you crop the image in a certain way, the meaning of the image or the perceptual meaning of the image can change. So those are my thoughts, that it's actually a difficult thing to implement.
Yeah, and also cropping can change the ability of AI to even determine whether or not that is the same image.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I know with YouTubers, like they're constantly trying to evolve ways to use material in a fair use context without it hitting the content ID police algorithm. So interesting thoughts on that. But what about an implementation? So I think what was proposed here is possibly news organizations who care about their journalistic integrity as part of their reputation adopt this as a standard for verifying their own information from other trusted sources.
Right.
And if it's just a metadata standard, I think what is being said here is that the metadata would be removed.
Yeah. So
if
the
change happens.
The problem with trust right now is that some of these organizations that we traditionally thought as very reliable sources, right? Even scientific organizations, they are coming under the radar. People are no longer trusting them, right? So the trust has to be distributed in some sense. And if it is just news organizations, half the country will not trust them, right? There is this division that people are not comfortable, right? I'm just picking names, but you could have some people on the left side of the political spectrum. They trust certain organizations, and there are people on the right side of the political spectrum. They trust something else, right? So it becomes very difficult when when the news media, which right now people have very little trust in, right? And the same thing happens with our political judicial system also, which is very unfortunate. Half the people in the country do not trust the other side, right? So that is why I'm slightly skeptical. It has to be the best implementation of trust that I have seen recently, and I don't know how long this will last, is on X axis. Actually, the community notes, it is implemented in a way.
Oh yeah,
that
I participate every once in a while.
Okay. So that is, those are people in the center, and there are certain rules who can participate in that, etc. And I find that much more reliable than somebody, with authority giving a stamp of approval.
Yeah, I barely sign on anymore, but that's actually when I do the first thing I check, because I take that duty pretty seriously. I think it helps the information ecosystem. And I do see other people, because you could see the evolution of how something is sourced and how people comment on it.
Yeah.
That I think is very, very helpful for providing context to sometimes manipulated information, or even sometimes not willfully maliciously augmented, right?
Yeah.
People just believe this is what they're seeing, and they're reporting it that way. But when you put it up against a more objective lens, it fails. What are your thoughts, Ram?
Yeah, I've been thinking about that problem for a long, long time too. So it's similar in the way that when you try to wear the hood of Batman, I still know that it's you. But a lot of these AI systems will fail. So the way these systems work is that they look at information and data superficially. But for us humans, we have a history, we have a context. So I know who Mike is. So then I can build that. I can then connect information. I can connect bits of information in my mind to deduce that, oh, it's actually you, easily. But for these systems, it's very difficult for them to detect who it is. Or for example, with Satya, he puts on a false mustache, and these systems will fail catastrophically. So, but then your niece can easily recognize you. Ah, it's you, uncle.
Right.
So these systems are only looking at pixels, are only looking at this raw data, this raw computer data, and we are only feeding the systems this limited amount of data without proper contextualization. Now, proper contextualization means we have to support it with more metadata. Now, the way we look at metadata is that metadata usually pales in comparison to the main data in terms of size. Metadata usually is very scattered, very small, very sparse. But if you try to flip the other way around, the way humans think, we humans actually use a lot of metadata compared to data to recognize things, to recognize faces, to recognize voices.
Yeah, almost like a gestalt of a thing, right? So like I was looking for these headphones yesterday, and they were in a non-normal place that I don't put them, but I remembered a thought about, well, I wanted to monitor something with headphones while I was sitting down at the TV. So I came to the general area of the living room, and boom, that thin sub-pixel line of the wire is what told me those are the headphones. And I couldn't imagine current image classification technology accomplishing that goal, because it was context driven, and then also I was able to parse it out of the environment at a level that I don't think it could. So very, very interesting thoughts. Last licks go to you, Patrick. What do you think about what everybody else said in context of this stamping system?
No, I think it's super important feedback. Like, we all agree that some sort of authentication process is essential here, but understand how difficult of a problem that is to solve. Overall, I said 3 points as I look at this. The first is this article, to me, just highlights the importance of deep fakes and the risks of deep fakes. This shows it in the political setting. We see it, it can create global instability if used improperly. I, as a lawyer, think of it in the courtroom context, the risk of deep fake evidence out there. You don't know what you can trust. You can't no longer believe what you can see. So deep fake's clearly a problem. We all agree on that. The second point is the importance of finding some sort of solution, some sort of authentication process to help us know what we are seeing, whether it's real or not. And then third and finally, I think, this episode is about AI ethics. And I would say this highlights both the risks and the potential of AI, because it's AI power that creates these deep fakes, but only AI is going to be powerful enough to help us authenticate and discern the real from the fake. And so it's both the problem and the solution in one.
Well, thank you for bringing this up. I thought it was an interesting take, kind of, teases the mind to think about the topic in different ways. So our next article is actually from our guest who couldn't show up. She had to deal with some sickness, from Myrna. So no AI machines can't think. I'm going to summarize some of her notes here. So Alan Turing's 1950 imitation game aimed to determine if machines can think, measuring their ability to fool humans. However, it only gauged if machines could imitate humans. So one of the issues with the Turing test that people bring up is it doesn't seem sufficient anymore. Lovelace proposed for a more sophisticated evaluation of creativity. So if people don't know who Ada Lovelace was, she worked in close tandem with Babbage, if you've heard of Babbage's, from the UK. Very formative name in computing. He developed the analytical engine, which, based on the Jacquard loom, some people, and punch card system, some people believe is the first real computer. So the need for solid definitions of thinking, intelligence, and sentience is emphasized, distinguishing finite systems from complex, multidimensional nature of human decision-making, which we kind of covered in the last segment towards the end. There's a lot of skepticism about AI achieving true sentience and thinking abilities, highlighting the uniqueness of human attributes such as creativity, emotion, and self-awareness. The question remains about the ability of AI to go beyond the boundaries of two-dimensional tasks and truly replicate the complexities of human existence. So one question I'll kind of pose to everybody right off the bat is, does it matter if it truly imitates human reasoning or the way that we actually come to conclusions if it could get to similar results? I think the societal impacts could probably be just as large, even if it doesn't have to derive creativity from emotions or an entire life. But what do you all think? Who wants to go first?
I'd like to go first.
Sure.
So one of the reasons why we'd like to have them aligned with us is our morals, values, and ethics. This is something I'm also big about. So if machines are going to behave not in accordance to human ethics and laws, then we're going to have a big problem. So we need them to understand how we humans interact with each other. One of the reasons why we want to make them behave and feel what we humans feel is that we want them to cooperate with us now and in the near foreseeable future. Because if we are going to give them full autonomy over the use of resources, then they might compete against us. That could result in an even bigger um, even worse scenario.
Patrick, Satya, do you have any rebuttal to that or agreement with it?
No rebuttal from my perspective. I think that's a very valid perspective. As I look at the article, it really has questions the original Turing test. Almost 75 years later now, that will we mistake this system for a human? That's been a pretty good standard that has stood the test of time. I'm not opposed at all to finding a new standard. I just don't have a better solution at this time. So I'd say until we can propose one that we all agree is better than that, then I'm fine with holding on to the old Turing test.
Yeah, well, it definitely provides a foundation, but I think there's one of the issues that's arising is people are easily personifying these AI outputs, and in some cases, even with full knowledge of how they operate. So I think that's one of the failings of the Turing test, but it does definitely provide a baseline for measuring some form of intelligence, right? Being able to store memory, respond probabilistically, but it does seem to be missing something in my eyes. Satya, what are your thoughts?
No, so I agree. First of all, whenever we evaluate AI, we are a little, we are not fair to the AI technologies that are being developed, because as soon as we hit a milestone, we change the definition of intelligence, right? For the longest time, Turing test was considered the, benchmark to hit. If you do this, yes, we will agree that intelligence has been achieved. And now that on several tasks, Turing test fails, right? I mean, AI is able to behave like humans or masquerade as a human. And now we say that, okay, that's not good enough, right? And also when we compare AI, we don't compare it to the average human, we compare it to the best human, right? It's not sufficient that on an average, it beats a chess player, it has to beat Gary Kasparov, right? And then we would believe, right? But I also want to expand that the reason Turing, just limiting ourselves to human AI abilities is it's actually limiting, because intelligence can be much more than human. It can be superhuman. And as an example, I'll give you when you're driving, a self-driving car, right? Or just any car which doesn't have full self-driving yet, but enough, right? When a human is performing that task, you are limited by two eyes, right, that are looking forward. But a car doesn't need to be limited by just two eyes. You can have 8 cameras, 9 cameras on the car, and you can have many sensors, which humans don't have, right? We don't have, let's say, ultrasonic sensor, or we don't have radar, etc. But a self-driving car can have that. And so the capability of self-driving, which is not there yet, but there is a good case to be made that it would be superhuman, right? So in that sense, we can say that we should not be judging AI by human capabilities. We should have higher expectations from them, right? From a technical point of view. But from the other point, so this is not contradicting, or rebutting what Ram said, but those are different dimensions, right? One is the human interaction dimension, the other is the technical dimension of what we can expect from AI.
Capability versus ethical outcomes.
Yes.
So like, just because we train an AI that it within a range of capabilities would be able to do something harmful, the alignment question of it being restricted to not do that thing is kind of separate and apart from the technical side, is what you're saying.
Right. From a technical point of view, we can expect AI to surpass human capabilities just because it's not limited by biology, right? Like the kind of things that we, like two eyes is a great example. We can only see forward, we cannot see behind us, but AI can have, 360 view of the surrounding.
So one of the things that kind of bothers me, though, of even just the terminology artificial intelligence and kind of all the kind of emotions that brings to fore is some of these issues that we just brought up, even alignment of automated systems. They could be conditionally programmed, and you still have to face these issues, right?
Yeah.
Computers can repeat tasks at a level that humans can't. They can produce results at a level that humans can't.
Yeah.
That doesn't devalue the human interaction between these devices or even giving them direction. So I just feel like sometimes the term AI clouds things. Last comments from anybody before I move to the next article on the statement I just made?
Yeah, so one other thing I wanted to add to your statement is that as long as we think of AI as a collaboration between machines and humans, that's the right way to think about it, not as a competition, right? Because it's not at a stage where it's going to take over anytime soon. But as a collaborative tool, it can really, as Steve Jobs says, that computers were the bicycle for the minds, right? And there's this whole story he tells about how humans are really inefficient in locomotion, but compared to other animals, but a human on a bicycle surpasses everybody else. And so computers are the bicycle for the minds. And the same thing applies for AI, that if you use it as a collaborative tool, right, it's a collaboration between humans and machines, then we can achieve superhuman goals, right?
Yeah, it's funny, and I think what's one of my largest concerns with the current kind of upswell and productization of LLMs is kind of this weird thing where I think it's because they're trying to sell to managers and CEOs, where they're trying to make it seem like this technology absolutely can replace people at a level that it can't. And that is backfiring on huge corporations like Sports Illustrated, for example, who are placing bets that, like, yeah, I could get rid of this annoying staff and their health insurance, and this AI can just write these articles. And it's so reductive to the point where the end result is because these LLMs are trained on the corpus of actual creative data, they actually can't produce proper creative fact-checked results at the level that a human can. So it's a misuse of the tool, right? Whereas I use AI for expert systems, like I uploaded a whole bunch of documentation about an API that I needed to use, and it gives me 90% right answers at a level that Stack Overflow couldn't. That's an actual use and improvement of a tool that we currently have. So I'm just going to take a quick break to thank our sponsors. Special thanks to the ASTN Group. They've been supporting Dawn and many of our network shows for a long time. Carasoft, Airspace Link, Speedbird Aero, and Drone Responders for making this episode and the entire quarter of episodes possible. Also, thank you to the audience for tuning in today. We really appreciate that. We're going to move on to our next article, which I believe is ROM's, and it's addressing mediocrity, which we kind of just hit the edge on. So let's talk about AI and mediocre AI.
Yeah, I chose that article because I like the title.
I know you did.
It's so provocative, and it really hits home. So let me start by saying that the term AI, as it is commonly used online nowadays, mostly refers to generative AI, which is what GPT and similar systems are. However, there are other forms of AI, like context AI, symbolic AI, etc. So I'm going to be talking about Gen AI for this article. So true creativity, I believe, stems from unique experiences. It requires genuine emotions. It requires history. Would you agree? So which kind of food tastes generally better? The one from the can, produced by the factory, or the one that your loved ones cook for you?
Grandma's sauce is better than Chef Boyardee for sure.
So most of what generative AI does nowadays is that it builds on the past and creates a form of mashup of ideas. So it does not really predict the future, in direct contrary to how these companies promote the systems, and then they fail catastrophically. Just like what you might mention earlier about Sports Illustrated. So a junior level writer can easily detect that
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't make sense. So I'm gonna revise that. So so imagine the amount of power that these systems use compared to the amount of power that the human uses. Like so, for an adult, I think that's between 100 and 200 watts while working. So compared to the power of a small city to train the systems. Now again, I don't like that word too. Train. It's like, do we train ourselves to do a specific task? So I'm really good at bicycling. I'm really good. I'm an expert bicyclist, but I suck at walking. So I'm gonna spend my whole life being the best biker, but I'll fail catastrophically at simple walking. So it doesn't make sense. So again, somebody mentioned this earlier, along the lines of it works because of confirmation bias, because the things that these systems generate are already the ones within our expectations. So we yield the results that we seek. Do you agree?
Mm.
So the use of generative AI will not turn anyone into a writer because the creative process and the experience needed to fuel the mind of the writer is now absent. It's no longer there. So how can you, if you as a human will be able to feel the depths of what you're reading of the book. Like if you look at if you look at the of a book, if you look at the book by Stephen Hawking, you can really see there how far is he coming from, how deep are his experiences, how deep are his thoughts. He goes into your mind. So with these machines, with these AI systems, they try to fabricate that. So I would say that originality is produced when you go through the unfamiliar, the unexpected. Mediocrity, on the other hand, is produced when you subscribe with the familiar. The best ideas are counterintuitive.
True. Can AI do humor? Well, it could repeat dad jokes, but can it really kind of nail a societal moment in the way that comedians these days are expected to be both philosophers and comedians? I don't. I think that would be very challenging for a system to do. But
I agree with you, Mike. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
yeah, yeah. Oh no, I'm just saying. But most people are mediocre, hence the definition of it. So, Patrick, what were you going to say?
No, those are great points. I'm going to push back a little bit on Rom and say that all of us, I think, are a bit of a compilation of our past experience. Like we are trained by our past. We're trained by books that we read. We're trained by pieces of art that we see in museums, and that shapes who we are differently, of course, than how the LLMs learn. But I think it goes back to Satya's earlier point about the importance of putting together, teaming humans and augmenting humans with these capabilities. Now, obviously, when it comes to the pace of calculations, none of us can compete with a computer. But when it comes to humor, we all just agreed, I think, that humans are generally better than machines at this. And so to the extent we can combine these skills in a way that augments humans, I think we end up with a better result. But I will say I've seen the works of art that DALL-E can produce, and they far exceed any of my artistic capabilities. And so I'm a bit of an AI optimist out there, and I think that there is an opportunity here and the option for AI to totally outperform us in many areas.
That's an interesting example because like if you were to think about objective skill, like just putting pixels to the canvas there, yeah, DALL-E can outperform me, and I've been doing art on the side for my whole life. But also, everybody can tell it's a DALL-E image now. It has like certain characteristics to it, so that actually becomes the definition of mediocre.
So give it a month, Mike. It'll update.
Yeah, they keep saying that, but then whatever they update it with just becomes closer to the original. Which, if we have time, we can actually tap into that in our 5th article. Satya, any comments there?
Well, the first comment is that, first of all, we always compare AI to the best humans, not to the regular humans. It's going to outperform all of us, right? But will it outperform Einstein, right, in creative thinking? Probably not. Or, it's sampling from this huge, network, so to speak, and occasionally it might hit, right? So it is going to be like a human population. Most of the time, it is going to create very mediocre results. Occasionally, it might hit, some interesting thing, right? And usually, when you create, especially in generative AI, we have this notion of temperature, right? So if the temperature is very low, when there's a parameter that you set while generating these things, if the temperature is very low, it is actually going to produce the most likely outcome, right? And so you will get predictable results every time you run it. But if you set the temperature to be high, it starts hallucinating. It goes all over the place, right? So it is almost like a creative genius who has lost his mind, right? So it goes to places where you would find that, okay, there could be a lot of creativity there, also a lot of madness there. So I'll give you an example of John Nash, right? John Nash, the beautiful mind, a mathematician who, he had difficult problems with all this hallucination. And people asked him that, John, you are such a brilliant person. How could you not recognize that this is hallucination, right? What you're seeing, he was seeing real people, right? And he said that, look, because there is no way to differentiate. The math that came to me was through the same mechanism, right? I could see things that others could not see in mathematics, right? The equations or whatever theories he came up with, those things came from the same place that these people came from, these imaginary people, right? One of them was useful and real, the other was not, right? And the same thing happens with generative AI also, right? Most of the time, it is just regurgitating what other people have done. Occasionally, it will hit a genius moment. And another example I want to just add is Terence Tao. He is one of the smartest, biggest mathematician alive today at UCLA. He's collaborated with a ton of people, and he's regarded as one of the best mathematicians of the day. He has started using ChatGPT, and he says that it helps him. Most of the time, the suggestions, he's interacting with the AI collaboratively, and most of the time, the suggestions the AI gives is rubbish. But occasionally, he hits a line of thought that he could have missed if he were not using this tool, right? So so my to summarize, first of all, we compare AI to the best. AI is, by definition, it's going to produce mediocre results most of the time. There is no doubt about that. And Ram is absolutely right in that article also, that most of the things would be mediocre, but occasionally it will look like genius, because it's the same kind of creative thinking, the leap of faith thinking, where you have, in creative thinking, you have this hypothesis, which you don't know whether it's right or wrong. You just come up with it from thin air, and then you work your way backward and see whether it works or not. And if it works, that's great. Otherwise, you throw away that idea, right?
Yeah, there's a common phrase, the thought occurred to me.
Yeah.
How? It seems like you didn't have the thought happened to you, right? And that is something that I hear creatives say. But one of the things that I'm not sure about what you said, that or gives me a little bit of pause. Like, there's the famous example of, if you give enough monkeys a typewriter, they might type Shakespeare.
Yeah.
But does that really make it Shakespeare? I think what Ram is saying is there's certain things that we actually value in terms of creativity that are derived literally from the human experience and the other context around how that person arrived at that thought.
That's absolutely right. I mean, that But on the other hand, there is a lot of guesswork and creativity also. If you look at Feynman's lecture, Richard Feynman's lecture, he says, here's what the scientific process looks like. You start with a guess, right? You start with a hypothesis. You don't know whether it's right or not. It just occurred to you. It just came to your mind. You don't know how, right? And it's actually, it doesn't matter how it came to you. And but I also agree. I mean, I'm actually trying to expand the argument. I also agree with Ram. If somebody told me that this artist, right, did not actually think about the interpretation, then my respect for that artist goes down, right? No, it's
It's true. It's true.
right. If the artist built something, right, but they did not intend, and now we as the audience are seeing it, and we are interpreting new things in the art, then that's the failure of the artist. I would not respect them. It is just a fluke, right? So I agree with Ram. The intent is very important, and we don't know, at least now at the moment, AI is not doing this intentionally. It is basically mashing up things.
Yeah, so you use the word temperature. In traditional computing, I would just call that random fuzzing, right?
Yeah.
Which seems to be the same thing or more accurate. So like, if you get a random result that's interesting, that's no different than a dice roll. It could be very intoxicating to go through dice rolls and eventually pick out something. But keep in mind, when you're selecting the thing that is valuable out of that, that's a human transaction now. I'm deciding that's valuable information, and that's where I think, again, this is a tool. We're not at a level where these systems are interacting where they can even take and interpret each other's informations or outputs and then determine usefulness, and then down the line at the level that a human can, according to the article that Myrna brought up, something like on the order of 30,000 micro decisions a day, right? So Ram, final thoughts on mediocrity before we move on?
Yeah, the same that goes with the creative process of a 4-year-old child. So it's very difficult to predict what they're going to do. With the little amount of information that they know about the world, and yet there's plenty of chaos and order in their minds. So the system doesn't have to be big in order to produce entropy. So my hypothesis there is that entropy can exist in very small forms, and entropy does not imply volume or mass. It's there in a place that we haven't discovered yet. So the way we are trying to approach these things, we have to build these big systems and train them with all the data in the world. But then, if you compare the reasoning of ChatGPT with a 4-year-old child, the reasoning of a 4-year-old child can easily outperform these GPT systems, and with humor too.
Yeah, so that's an interesting idea, because you're saying if we took the entire corpus of human information, you can apply some entropy to that or random fuzzing, and there might be some novel things that we're able to pick out of that, but then it is still limited by the corpus of human information in the first place, right? So even what we could even pick out as useful is still limited by the initial data set. So it's not necessarily definitionally creative.
Yes, and similar to what Noam Chomsky said before, he said in one of his papers, the language acquisition device (LAD). It's a device that's present. It's a hypothetical device that's present in our heads that produces that gives us the quality to acquire languages even from a young age. So, but then you have to train these big systems to learn languages. But with preschoolers and toddlers, you don't have to give them the entire English dictionary nor rules of grammar in order to be able to communicate with them. So there's plenty of creativity there. There's plenty of entropy, plenty of randomness with very little information.
Yeah, so that kind of goes back to the point that these systems are not learning the way that we learn. That makes that a little bit clearer. Let's go on to an ethical issue that's pretty close to my heart, especially with the name OpenAI not really reflecting an accurate definition of that corporation that's essentially working for commercial purposes. So, Satya, you have some thoughts on open source and AI ethics. This is an article you wrote as the CEO of OpenCV. I think you have a very kind of close to the source perspective on this. So please share that with us.
Yeah. So the main idea of the article is that for AI to be ethical, it has to be open source, right? And in the article, I give several examples of where closed source systems, they produced very unethical results. For example, face recognition systems, they now they are getting better, but in the beginning, they did not recognize people of color as well as people, Caucasian people. The same thing with, there were other AI systems, non-visual systems like Compass, which is the criminal justice system, which penalized Black people more than African American people, more than, let's say, Caucasian people, right? And there were other, even Apple credit card system, right, which when Apple Card came out, people with men and women with very similar credit scores would receive different
credit limits.
Credit limits, right? And this was a big deal on Twitter for a short period of time. And similarly, we know that Microsoft chatbot Tay, it learned from Twitter conversations, and it became extremely racist and sexist, and it became a very bad bot, right?
Yeah, because it was just tracing likes and retweets.
Yeah.
So it was getting rewarded for being crappier.
Right. So all these systems, when they are closed systems, we don't know what data has gone into it and how they were trained. Then there is no scrutiny, right? It is only after they come out in the world and people start using it do we know that these are so biased, right? And in case like Compass is a great example where things could be away from public view, right? Because this system was implemented but not in public view, right? So we don't know what went into it and why it was doing all these, creating all these problems. So that is why it is super important that the data sets that we use, the source code we use, the models we train, all of that information is publicly available, right? We do it in public, and people can build on top of it. They can create commercial applications on top of it, but at least we know what data went into training these models, right? That is crucial. Otherwise, we will always be blindsided. There could be systematic bias in ways that most of us will not recognize. But if you saw the data, you would immediately recognize it, right? Sometimes we cannot infer from the output very easily, but if you look at the data, it would be very clear, right? So it's very important that all these systems be open source. And the algorithms need to be open source. Otherwise, we will almost never be able to fix the problem of bias.
Patrick, any comments?
Yeah, I actually have a question for Satya. I find this very interesting. I think in all of those examples of where AI went wrong that you listed, I think the producers of those voluntarily realized there was a problem and stopped. Would open sourcing have avoided the problem to begin with, or would it just allowed us to solve the problem faster?
We will never be able to avoid this problem completely, right? We will always run into these problems because the data is inherently biased, right? We have a history of bias in the world, right? And because of that reason, we will always have bias. We would have solved the problem faster, right? Maybe that chatbot that had to be taken off, maybe there was an interesting application of it, which we do not know because, it was not open source. Had it been open source, people would go and fix it, and maybe something useful would have come out of it instead of taking it out completely, right? And also, the fix would be much faster, especially with these AI systems, which are trained on very large data sets. for small teams to figure out what's going on, it's almost impossible. You need an army of people when something goes wrong to figure out where exactly things are wrong. So if it is open source, then there will be an army of volunteers who would come in and fix it.
I would also like to add security, Satya, which is one of the benefits of open source development in general. With the LLMs, it's been determined that essentially any training data can be exfiltrated with even a semi-intelligent attack,
right,
if you moderately automate what you're doing. So if the data set is publicly accessible, we would know. And in many cases, which I hope we could get to, licenses were violated that
yes,
if the data was done in public,
yep,
would not have been.
exactly, right. And it may slow down things a little bit when you have to actually
Ethically source your data.
source your data properly. But that is how we should do it, right? It is unfortunate that a lot of artists and people who created the content, they will have to figure out a way how to pay them. Otherwise, that's also another unethical part of the AI. Not just the bias inherent in the systems that we are building, but also the fact that we literally stole the data, right, from creators, and we have yet not paid them back, right? So that's another ethical concern.
Yeah, we could dive into that in a few minutes, but Ram, I want to get your feedback on this as somebody who's working on a proprietary AI system. What are your feelings about open source? Do you think there's any limits? Do you think there's any cases where it's kind of okay because the societal impact is low to build proprietary?
So proprietary and open source are not necessarily two opposite ends. So something can be proprietary and open source, and something can be open source and non-proprietary, combination of those things. So like what OpenAI did before. So essentially, the source code was open before their systems, and then somewhere down the road they decided to close it, right? Who among you do any of you remember the year when they did that?
It wasn't that long ago.
Yeah. I'm guessing 2020 or 2021. I don't know for sure.
Yeah, I think it was 2020 because they made that whole statement about how we're a special type of corporation that's a foundation for the stuff that we know we couldn't legally do as a commercial operation. So, which was very crypto of them. But yeah.
So
go on.
The approach that we are taking is very different from what they did, because they took in the ideas from these great engineers and these talents to build them as part of the core systems of GPT, and then they can just say why wait, bye bye, no more, adios. So but then as part of the agreement with these engineers, their ideas are already part of the system. There may be key algorithms that are already part of the systems, and then they just only pay them a dime for all the work that they've done. So that's also smart of them and sly at the same time. So the reason why we're building our systems currently as closed source is because the ideas that we have, the algorithms that we have, are not documented elsewhere. We are not based, for example, on machine learning. So we are also in the process of safeguarding these algorithms. And then who knows, maybe in the near foreseeable future, we can open parts of it for collaboration. Because I agree with what Satya said, that I myself is a strong proponent of open source. I also contribute to open source projects, and I feel uncomfortable using something that I don't know how it works. There could be backdoors in it. Anything could be. It could have monitoring tools. So when something is open source and I download it from the official repository, and then, for example, I built it from the source code, I know that can be trusted. It has been audited. It has been evaluated to be trustworthy compared to proprietary software. So one of the questions I would like to raise to Satya is that if these systems use a significant portion of the internet to train, how will the data be safeguarded? Will it be prevented? So we can give back to the sources, pay forward, but then how about for those sources that there is no direct link on how we're going to form an agreement with them? So some of this information are copyrighted, some are not. So how do we deal with that?
So again, this is an extremely difficult problem to solve, right? Trying to find out who should be compensated for the work. It is extremely difficult because the internet is full of things which are copied originally, right, from the original author. But what I feel is that if and frankly, I mean, if you want to compensate people, most of the people would receive, not even a cent, right? A millionth of a cent for their contribution to the LLM. So it is the big contributors. Let's say if you train on all all the work of Stephen King, then he should be compensated. If you because that's his life work, right? That he has been doing that for a long period of time, right? But let's say it is just it is just a small. I mean, at least we can start by providing compensation to people where it is verifiable that this work was indeed used, right? And then we will gradually figure out, how to compensate others. But at the tail, people may not even care, right? I'm receiving 1 millionth of 1 cent. Who cares, right? If I'm not compensated. But at least if we get the bulk right of all the creative people, then it's a good start, right? It's still not easy, right? But that has to be made because that step has to be taken because the cat is out of the bag on whether that theft has taken place, right? The theft has taken place. It cannot be undone, right? People have all that data has been trained on. We just have to compensate moving forward, right? It is not that, oh, remove my stuff from the LLM. That is not going to happen because a lot of this has been out, it is out. Everybody has access to it. And so it's not like you can remove the data easily from all the models out there, right? So the right way to do it would be to compensate.
I think we lost you for a second.
Okay, so the right way is to compensate the people because it's almost impossible to go and say that, oh, retrain the models with unlimited data where we know the source of the data, because that cat is out of the bag. There is nothing we can do.
Yeah, so I think I could touch on this a little bit. So I brought up another article. So this was by IE Spectrum, Generative AI as a Visual Plagiarism Problem. So the images that you're seeing here, The Simpsons, Darth Vader, Sonic the Hedgehog, these are actually AI generated, and the prompts were extremely simple, like cartoon with yellow-skinned people. So one of the issues I'll push back on is copyright is pretty nasty as a law. I remember, the whole sampling era of music and how that kind of has been reduced to if you even use a kid's YouTube video, you could get sued for violating copyright. If you sample 1,000 songs, it doesn't matter that it's tiny pieces of them. You actually owe every single one of those creators, and it is eminently traceable, and your content will be taken down and you'll be sued out of existence. Now, I think one of the issues that a lot of researchers are kind of bumping up against, actually, I just want to bring this up real quick. This is the actual Midjourney creators, according to John Lamb, who posted this on Twitter and is participating in the lawsuit against them, literally talking about laundering the data, the pixels, to make sure that the creators could not sue them. So there's some malicious intent there. That's not even just like an accident.
Right.
The thing here is, if the work is truly transformative, like, for example, you train on images that are licensed, but you're creating something that helps cars navigate, you are not commercially competitive with the person or creator of that content. And it's not, as far as I know, not a lawyer, an issue of copyright then. So I think it's important to remember that the copyright violation has to be a direct commercial competition. It's actually okay to use the data that's out there. I think the argument that people are having and the fear that all creators are having right now is, why should my stuff get stolen just because I posted it publicly?
Yeah.
And it's killing the open internet. I mean, it's really hurting it right now. So, Patrick, any thoughts on the legal side of this, on copyright?
Yeah, it's. I guess the takeaway is that it's not black or white. It's not like it's out there and you can use it, or you can't use it without copyright. There's a whole interplay gray area called fair use doctrine. And so when Stephen King writes his book and I buy that book and then I read the book and then I become an author years later, Stephen King's work has influenced me. But he doesn't get a royalty out of my new book that I produced. Neither do the other 500 authors that I've read over the course of time. That just shapes who I am as an author. It shapes who artists are when they see a work. And so that's all legitimate, non-compensable contribution to the general world. And trying to discern here where people are taking little teeny bites of what's out there, what should be compensable and what should not. That's an area that is unresolved right now, and a lot of courts are wrestling with that very issue. And I don't know the answer. I don't know how they're going to flush that out.
Yeah, it's the New York Times, Getty Images, these artists collective against Midjourney, and then also there's a lawsuit against OpenAI and Microsoft from specifically GitHub from people who had open source libraries that were stolen. Ram, you have something to say?
Yeah, this is strikingly similar to what happened before, prior to the invention of the press, the Gutenberg press. Remember, before, the books were used to be written by monks. Mm-hmm. So they were the exclusive manufacturers of this. Then during the transition, also in the other parts of the world, there were also we call Luddites.
Yeah.
So also the Luddites burned down the machines. So we are again, it's cyclic. I believe we're entering similar phase. So there will people who are going to get angry at these things. But we're trying to move forward in the same way that the invention of the cars displaced the horse carriages.
Yeah, so it's the technology is reposing the question with a different frame, but ultimately, how these things get resolved, it's going to be more nuanced, like Patrick said, than we think. But what I will say about the history of music and sampling is this data is easily traceable from source in some cases. And in those cases, it's probably going to be a lot more clear than I think the creators of these tools imagined. And until they could figure out a way to actually predict results to them before they do this, and it might be something simpler as like an output filter, which is what my article suggested. Like, hey, we check this against, does it perfectly match or come close within 5,000 pixels of training data? Well, then don't display it. These are answers that they can solve, but they didn't want to, so they might have to be facing some fines. All right, I'm sorry.
I'd like to also, sorry for that. So I would like also to add that along what Patrick and Satya said earlier, that before, when you release an image of a celebrity without proper notice, you're gonna get sued to hell. But now there are plenty of images of celebrities that look strikingly like them. It's very difficult to discern which is fake and which is true. All different. They're wearing different kinds of clothing, right, Satya and Patrick? But then, how many images are there? Can the system handle like one lawsuit per image, like billion images? So it would easily saturate the justice system.
Well, it would be a class action lawsuit, and they are playing out right now, right? There are several lawsuits, and they will play out. And I'm thinking that the AI industry moves the Spotify way, right, where they are compensating people, not the Napster way, right? And somehow, if we can compensate the creators, I think it is going to really help everybody.
Yeah, and people pay for Spotify, and they
Yeah.
paid for Apple Music, which was the solution against Napster prior to that.
Yeah.
Not Apple Music, it was iTunes. So I think that's the way that this goes. You know,
Yeah.
there's a period of like, oh my God, this opens possibilities, but then the creators push back on what they feel is their right to actually make a living off of what they produce, and ultimately society finds some balance through the justice system. Anyway, we are going way over than normal, but we've had such a great conversation. It's because we had great guests. Thank you, everybody, for participating. Again, I want to thank our sponsors, ASTN Group, Speedbird, Aero, Airspace Link, Drone Responders, and Carasoft for making this episode possible and every episode this quarter. Dawn has a recording of her Law Tech Connect sessions that's coming out next week on legal sea lanes for seafaring autonomous vehicles. Wednesday, that's tomorrow, we have the Dawn of Autonomy featuring our guests from True Weather Solutions. So please tune in same time for that tomorrow on the AUVSI YouTube channel. And I think that's it. We have everything that's going on for right now. I want to thank you all again, and we are out here.
Thank you.